Sibani, are you able to mute your microphone?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Come on.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome to this session of Black History Lunchtime Conversations. As I think all of you probably know, unfortunately, there's been a major storm in Australia. Liz, who is at her daughter's house, the house has been quite badly damaged, and so have vehicles, but they're safe, and that's the main thing. Also, that they have somewhere to move to. They can move back into the property that they were renting. But that means that Liz won't be able to join us today, so I'll chair today's session. Not nearly as well as Liz would have done it, so bear with me. We have 4 contributions planned for today. I'm still waiting for a couple of people to join our meeting, but we have Professor Sati Fatchak is with us, and Sati is going to start off. Sati, I'll just hand over to you. I mean, you're going to talk about the current project you're involved in developing resources for basic education. So over to you. Sati? Can you hear me, Sati? Can you unmute?
Yes, I can hear you, but the line is like talking. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you. Keep talking, and we'll see how if it improves. No, we're not hearing you, Sati. Can I welcome Dr. Sango?
Hello.
Hello. You were probably expecting to see Liz. I'm not sure if you've got the message. There's been a very bad storm in Australia. So I'm going to chair today's session.
No problem.
I'm having a little bit of problem. We're having a little bit of problem hearing Sati. Can we just try again, Sati, see if we can hear you? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me?
No, it's we can't hear Sati. I think what I should do is perhaps if we move on to Dr. Sango, who's going to tell us about the Books to Africa organization. Perhaps we can back to you, Sati, and see if the connection's improved. Is that okay with you? I'm not sure if you can hear me, Sati. Right, I'm going to ask Dr. Sango if he could tell us about the project. Dr. Sango, can you unmute yourself? Hello.
Right, hello everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Dr. Tonson Sango. I'm actually from Plateau State, from Jos, where Dr. Fatchak is from. In fact, I just got back from Nigeria 4 days ago. So I'm in quarantine right now. I'm in quarantine for the next 10 days. And I was in Jos, actually, setting up Books to Africa's new distribution center in Jos. So I'll be happy to tell you a bit more about what Books to Africa is about. And then if you have any questions for me, you can ask afterwards. I'm sorry, how many minutes do I have, David?
Really, as long as you want at the moment. Given that we're having problems, I mean, take the time that you need. I'll tell you if we need to move on.
All right. So Liz contacted the charity. So the charity I work for is called Books to Africa. And the website is books number 2, so books2africa.org. We're a UK-based charity. where our office in the UK is based here in Canterbury, in Kent. We collect books, donated books from individuals, organizations, institutions, libraries, publishers, new and fairly used books, and we process them here in Canterbury into different categories. So we have primary, secondary, novels, we have various university categories, we have other reference categories, Bibles, dictionaries, and so on and so forth. And then we export them to different institutions across Africa. So far, we have done almost 2 million books. We're just shy of 2 million books since we started. That is 2 million books distributed, shipped and distributed across different institutions, different academic levels in Africa. We've done over 20 African countries, mostly English-speaking African countries, as you can imagine. But the biggest country we've definitely served is Nigeria. I am Nigerian, of course. I'm one of the founders. All of us are Nigerians, the founders of this charity. Our story is a bit interesting in the sense that we all came here from Nigeria to study. So myself, I came to the University of Kent to study international conflict analysis. That was back in a couple of years. And my two brothers, who also came thanks to funding from our parents, to study, computer engineering and computing and entrepreneurship. So my background is in kind of history, politics, and conflict analysis. My two brothers' backgrounds are in computing, and my wife, whom I met during this whole journey, has a background in education and learning disabilities. So we, for the four of us, came together to start this charity as a small student initiative while we were at university in the UK. And the main thing that kind of spurred us on was, of course, on one hand, the need for educational resources, the lack thereof in Africa, in Nigeria, where we're very much acquainted with. Even in bookshops in Nigeria, you can't find some of the books that you would need, So there's a scarcity of books and educational resources in Africa generally. But on the other hand, there's also an abundance, perhaps, of resources here in the UK. Many of our student colleagues back at university will dump their books as they go on holiday. Many of them will be going to the dustbin or to the recycling, bin. So, we stayed on campus throughout the summer holidays. We saw how much resources were being thrown away, and we decided to do something about it. In other words, collect these books and ship them to those in need in Africa. Of course, it sounds very simple, and it is simple, but it's rather complicated when you start dealing with logistics and funding and packaging and getting things from A to B and customs and all the other complications. Anyway, so we started this in 2012. We have now shipped almost 2 million books. None of us knew how to run an organization. None of us had ever done anything like this, but over the years, we have learned along the way. We now have, in the UK, we have over 20 members of staff. In our Nigeria distribution center, we have about 10 members of staff and volunteers. And we now have offices in 4 other countries. We have Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana as well. So, in other words, we have a network where we can collect books from the UK and soon other countries too, and distribute them across these different countries in Africa. Now, the key, I'm aware of the University of Jos Library and the situation a few years ago when the library got burned down. I've actually visited the university several times. I haven't met Dr. Fatshak, and it's nice to meet you, but I've met other people, various different people, faculty heads, dean heads at the University of Jos, and I'm aware of the need, not just in the university, but also across other universities on the Plateau State as well. So Books to Africa is definitely in a position now that we have a distribution center in Jos itself to be able to support these universities with books. But of course, it comes down to A, what kind of books do they need? And B, what kind of funding do we have? Because if we were to ship, for example, just to give you a rough idea, and then I can stop. If we were to ship a 40-foot container of books, a 40-foot container cost us about £8,000 to ship. And that carries about 40,000 books, 40,000. So, I mean, I'm sure the university probably has the room to take 40,000 books, but that's the level of funding that will be required, which is minimal if you think about it. It's about 25p a book. And that's all we require is to cover that funding, the processing, the shipping, the clearing, the customs, and the haulage from Lagos all the way to Jos, which is a very treacherous journey these days. You know, lots of kidnapping and all sorts of things going on along the way. So really the funding that we try to raise is down to logistics and getting the books from A to B. But as far as the books themselves, many of which are very valuable, many of which cost, you know, hundreds of pounds in the market, they come free as a donation to the universities. Okay, so I can stop there for now, and I'll take any questions if you have any. Let me mention the Black History Month, Black History, because I know this is what it's about, Black History. I'm very interested in this topic myself, and I'm sure even after this meeting, I'll be happy to kind of join in on the lunch conversations every now and then, and, you know, contribute what I can and listen to some of your views as well. But it's a very important thing. One of the things we do, one of the reasons why we do what we do is because even as Africans, Nigerians living in the UK today, we continue to be concerned and, you know, affected by the events in Africa and even here in the UK, affecting the Black community here. Even though we're not exactly, our story is slightly different from those, you know, Black British people who were born here, or even those Black Americans who were, you know, born in America. But I think we have our own narrative and we have our own contributions. But whatever you may be, Black or white, you know, Africa is the motherland. You know, it's the mother continent. You know, humanity migrated from Africa. You know, and you know, if you believe in the out of Africa theory, for example. So I think there's a lot that, you know, the development of Africa and the image of Africa and the stance of Africa in the world does reflect on all Black people globally. And so it's important that as we strive for respect and equality, that really we have to think about where Africa stands in the world, and to be able to contribute our quota to level the playing field a little bit. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Sango. We've been joined by a few more people, including Dr. Bumi Oyinsan, who's in Toronto but is from Nigeria, and Jean Samuel. Welcome. Could I ask a couple of questions first? I mean, the first one is about, you know, what books are needed and what don't you need? I mean, so people are thinking of getting books to you. You know, have you any guidelines? And I mean, you're running from the UK. Do you have any? You know, does anybody support you in assisting people to get books to you in Canterbury, or, you know, is that just down to whoever wants to donate?
Sure. So we take pretty much all books, and I say that because we have a processing unit, you know, a processing center. So all the books that come in, we find that it's easier to say to people, donate all your books, and then we then sort through the books and categorize them and weed out anything we don't need. Now, it's very rare that we find things that we can't send to Africa, because whatever the subject, whether it's primary, secondary, novels, whether it's books about cooking, or whether it's you know, art, you know, there's always a university, a specialized institution, a public library that might want those books. So you know, even the old book, the really, really old books, you know, books that might be out of date, you know, in certain areas, we do have a rare books team as well. So our rare books team are normally interested in getting those old books and reviewing them. Some of them we can't send because, you know, they're outdated, but some of them actually are still valuable for our charity shop. So we have a charity shop here. We can divert some of those really old books to the charity shop, sell it to people who are collecting them here in the UK, and raise money that way. So at the end of the day, anything you send us will not be you know, wasted, as it were. The only books we tend to recycle are books that are in poor condition. So books with, you know, spine damage or water you know, damage or anything like that, then we would recycle. But generally, as long as the book is intact, it's written in English, it's educational. So educational means either for academic reasons, academic use, or for leisure reading, just reading for as a hobby, then we'll take those books, definitely. We also take other things. We take notebooks, we take computers. We have a, you know, IT refurbishing center as well. We take you know, devices such as tablets and so on. So really, we take other supplementary educational resources apart from books, but books are our main kind of thing. Yeah, what was the other question?
The other was getting books to you from
so to
throughout
get
the
books
UK.
to get books to us here in Canterbury, you have two options. If you want to donate your books, you first of all need to package them into a parcel or box. So if you have any cardboard box laying around the house, you can use that to package your books. And then you can either drop it off yourself. So if you go on our website, you can arrange an appointment to bring the books down. So if you want to drive down to Canterbury, see the cathedral, make a day out of it, you're welcome to do so, and then drop off the books. Or you can arrange a collection. So the collection is £7 for each box, and we can send a courier to your house to pick it up from your door. Now it's £7 for up to 20 kilograms. So you can fill up a box up to 20 kg, which is a lot. And it's only £7 because the couriers actually give us a discounted rate as a charity. So we can pick that up straight from your door and over to us. And we also, one thing we also do is anybody who is donating books gets a unique donor ID. And so when you send us your boxes, you write that donor ID on the box. And when we receive the box here, we can check it in. We have a system where we catalog all the books. We have a list of every single book you give us. And we track every single book all the way down to the final receiver or recipient rather of that book in Africa. And maybe another time I'll show you our system just to show you how we track every single book.
That's great, thank you. Dr. Fada, you wanted to come in?
Yes.
With a question.
Yes, thank you very much. That is very, very interesting, Tonson. It's good to meet you. I know that Liz had done an email and have introduced us, but it's really fantastic what you're doing. I want to tell you that we have also attempted to do what you are doing. And it's not as if we have attempted, we are doing, but on a very smaller scale. What it is just like you. I came here to do a PhD in Bangor University, and I realized that there were so many books that were put out by students that finished their PhDs and other studies, as well as some lecturers that have to be transferred or have to retire. They put out their books and nobody was collecting those books. They were just going to waste. And so I decided to start collecting the books on a smaller scale. And as I traveled back and forth from Nigeria, I'm from Gombe State, Nigeria, but I work for University of Jos. As I traveled back and forth, I started taking some of the books and donating to schools, especially in the local communities I worked in. And I realized the books were so many and I couldn't travel with them because I'm of course entitled to only 2 boxes and my cabin bag. So I actually started collecting and befriended people in the library. And then they were keeping the books for me. And also they put out advertisement for book collection. People that didn't want their books, they put out, I still have the box in our library down here in Bangor with my name and photo on it. And then people donated books. And we were able to collect books like you, sorted books of up to 19 cartons. Wow. And I tried to give it to University of Jos at the time. I went, had a meeting with the librarian, invited one of the lecturers. They came here, he was a dean. We talked about all these things, but they were not forthcoming because of my situation. I was not able to fund the money for shipping the books. I didn't have that money. So I said, University of Jos, pay for shipment and then have the books, but they couldn't do it. At the end of the day, I offered it to ATBU, Professor, what's his name now? I've forgotten. But he was able to raise the money and pay for the shipment, and we sent 19 boxes them. Wow. Fantastic idea. Yeah, now we have collected another batch, and we were aiming to send it to South Africa, but COVID came And then we were very unsure of the recipients on that side. So we have diverted that opportunity now to Gambia. So what we have now is going to the Gambia. So I think I would ask you a few questions, and then we are willing, because we're in Wales, we are willing to partner with the libraries, the schools, secondary school, primary schools, collect books, as many as possible, and send them to Africa. I think we have the same mission, because these books, if we don't take them, they're going to waste anyway. So it's better we collect them and send them to the empty libraries in Africa. So it's the same vision, and it doesn't matter who does it. That is my philosophy. It doesn't matter who does it, as long as it's done. So we are happy to actually collaborate with you. I don't know if you're yet a registered charity. Are you registered yet?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. We've been registered since 2013.
Okay, so we are North Wales Africa Society as it is now, because when we started North Wales Africa Society in 2018, I just put that project on the North Wales Africa Society. We have 3 focus groups: social, education, and business areas that we focus on. Jean Samuel, that you see on the call, is also part of us.
Okay.
So we are happy. We put a book collection project under our education subcommittee. So we can definitely work with your team to make sure we collect as many books as possible. If it's going to be easier to send it to Canterbury, we would definitely do that. And we're happy to also call you in one of our meetings, so that we don't take over this meeting, so that you meet us and we talk more. So it's really exciting what you're doing, and I must congratulate you. It's not easy to come here as a student and do a very laudable project like this. So congratulations.
Yeah. No, this is an exciting conversation. Simon, you had a question.
Yeah, I was asking whether you, Tonson, whether you also operated in some of the Francophone countries. I don't mean just for French books, but also potentially for English language books, where there is also demand, I know, in Benin, because people often feel trapped in just the Francophone sphere, and there's a lot of demands, a lot of push to increase the speaking of English. So I wondered whether you also operated there.
Yeah. At the moment, we have, I believe we've shipped, because when we ship books, we either ship books directly to a school. So, a project university, they receive the books directly from the UK, or we ship it to a distribution center, which is in effect a branch of Books to Africa, and they can then distribute it onwards to people in need. So we have done 1 or 2 direct shipments to projects in Francophone countries, especially places like Cameroon, even Morocco, on one occasion. But we're trying to do more. We haven't done as many as we would like to. Would really like to be able to ship books to every single country in Africa. With the Francophone countries, we found that the barriers there are down to, well, first of all, the language barrier. So the fact that, for example, our website is in English, the fact that we advertise mostly to English-speaking African countries, the fact that most of the content about what we do is in English. So we're starting to work on a translation of our website so that Francophone countries can actually access that information, can know about us, can know that they can benefit from our book donation program. That's the first step. And the second step is, of course, like you said, even though we don't have that many French books, but it is something that we can do. Right now we have one of our palette categories. So our book categories is called French collection. So we're currently putting all French books that we get in the UK into one big category. And in that category, you have, French books for children, French books for adults, French books that are sort of university level. So it's not really effective right now. And partly because, again, we need people who can read French to be able to sort French books properly. So the fact that our operation is based in England, the fact that we're getting mostly English books, the fact that we have mostly English staff, and the fact that our website is in English is really they're all hindrances to us reaching to Francophone countries. So we are really looking into how we can move all of that so we can have a kind of a French operation, if you like. Of course, before Brexit, we actually visited France, which is just across the border here, not too far from where we are. We actually scouted a few locations for a potential processing center there, so we can collect books in France, in French, two French-speaking countries. But then Brexit happened, and that plan has kind of been pushed back. Because really the plan was for the French processing center to just receive the books, sort them, and then if necessary, they can transport them across the border to Canterbury to be loaded into the truck. But now, of course, transporting things across the border isn't straightforward anymore, and you have to do all sorts of things and customs and duty. And so, yeah, but we do have plans to reach more Francophone countries in the near future.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you don't need to talk to me about the border problems. It's something I'm deeply engaged with. But I'll pass the information on to, it's the son of an old colleague of mine at the University of Abermacalvi, and he was trying to set up an English library and school. So I will pass the information on and see if.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do have a small collection of French books, like I said. So
yeah.
if they do need French books or English books, they can always reach out to us.
Yeah. And they may also have, because a lot of people from Benin are in France, they may even have people in France who may be useful for you as well in collecting in France. So,
yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Simon. I think we've lost Sati again, and I'm guessing the connection has just not been good enough. It was okay visually, but the problems with the sound. So I think otherwise I would have moved to Sati just now to talk about his project in basic education. Does anybody else want to ask Tonson any questions or make any comments? If you do, just come in. Yes, Mark. Yes.
I wish that he can put an email or website address in the chat box, please.
Okay. That'll happen. I'll just let Tonson do that. There it is. Martin.
Dr. Sango, am I unmuted? No, not yet.
You are, yes. No, you're unmuted.
Dr. Sango, for your fundraising, obviously you'll try and raise funds from wherever you can. But I just happen to have a contact in Canterbury who's both on the church side, but also at the university. He was the Dean of Chaplains at University of Kent. And he might be able to find some good contacts through his church or university network that could help your fundraising. Is that of any use to you, or do you in fact feel you can get funds better from other sources?
Well, again, we don't really have a problem with where the funding comes from, as far as we're concerned. Because again, the responsibility to raise funds lays on both us as a charity, which we have a strategy to try and raise money, as you can imagine, but also on the people receiving books themselves. Because whatever money we raise as a charity, there's only enough to go around. I mean, in a month, we get over 100,000 books are requested across Africa every month. So we definitely don't have enough money to send everybody's books. So what we say to the people who need the books, for example, the University of Jos or any other institution, is for them to also make an effort to raise that money. So if the University of Jos is able to raise money from their network, whether it's academics, whether it's churches, whether it's whatever network, whatever people they have within their network, that's absolutely fine with us. However, as long as the money is raised and we're able to fund that shipment, we don't have a problem with that. And I'm happy to meet, who your contacts here in Canterbury. Not a problem at all, and discuss strategy.
Good. So I'll send an email to my friend because he may be well contacted, with the Archbishop, with politicians. He used to represent the Church of England in the international ecumenical conferences at places like Geneva, and then he changed sides. He's now, it's like going from Manchester City to Manchester United. He started off as an Anglican priest, and now he's with the Catholic Church. So I'll send him an email.
Oh, is it
and
Father
see
Peter?
if he's Sorry? Yeah, Father Peter Geldop. Yeah.
I know. I'm aware of him very well. Yeah.
I'm a close friend of his. We sort of we've been flatmates and crossed paths on the rugby field and all over the place. So I'm a close friend of his. So then I probably don't have. I'll send him an email giving your good wishes to him and just saying if he hasn't thought about it before, Dr. Sango could use his networking talents to get contacts. So,
Definitely.
and I'll copy you on your email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did anybody else want to come in? Oh yes, Dr. Fada.
Can I come in again? Since
Yes.
We can't find Professor Sati. So what it is I'm just thinking of, are you just focused on the collection of books and sending, or you're happy to go an extra mile to ensure that people actually use these books? Because my experience of, donating books to institutions translates to them putting it in the libraries. So only a select group of people can access these books. But when you target maybe local communities, rural communities, and begin to create or build libraries, it doesn't have to be a fancy building, then you are able to sort of inculcate the habit of reading, and that can translate to increase in literacy. And let me give you a quick example with I have an organization that is Telefi, and it's just an organization that has been established to empower local communities in northern Nigeria, including Plateau State, where you're from. And in Plateau State, we have somebody brought my attention to a community that is called Basa, Jebu Basa, something like that. Yes. So I visited them. The problem is the children go to school. There's a government school there, but there is no learning at all. They are just, they can't speak English, they don't know mathematics, but they wear uniforms and go to school. So somebody started a reading club in the community just to contribute her quota. And she's partnering with one of the members of Telefi. So he drew my attention to it. So I said to them, having a club, a reading club once in a week, it's good, but it will take you, the impact will be very, very insignificant. Let us go to the root of the problem. And that is, let's visit the school and hear from them. So we went to the school, met with the head teacher, and he allowed us to interact with the students, different classes from class 6 to class 1. And honestly, simple things as spell your name, they cannot. What is coronavirus? Clueless. National anthem, nothing. So we now scheduled a meeting and met the SUBEB chairman of Plateau State and said, this is what we have realized in this community. We are happy to help them. We can, build a library for the community and ensure that they read, but we will go a step higher by collaborating with University of Jos so that the Maths and English department can send their students, 300 level, 400 level students during sideways to teach in those schools, because there are no maths teachers, no English teachers, no science teachers in the school. So why I'm giving you this example is so that all this effort you're doing here is good to collect the books, but you also have to think about the bigger picture. You don't have to do it all yourself, but look for the people that are on ground that you can partner with to ensure that these books actually really impact in the lives of people. That is the one. Then secondly, the issue of shipment, the cost of shipment. Honestly, just like you're saying, make sure that whoever is receiving this also commits, because I know the burden of costs in this country. Make sure that people that are receiving understand the value of this and also meet you, even if it is not all the way, let them meet you halfway and buy these books. I am a Nigerian. I know that Nigerians, when you give them things, I'm not saying that it's when they buy things, they value them better than when you just give it to them. So you can just give it to them and it remains on the shelves. But when they buy, they would now put it to good use. So these are just a few suggestions. I hope it helps.
Thank you. I see that we've got Sati back. I'd just like to check if we've got a good enough sound connection, because I think what Sati was going to present about is in a way an answer to part of your question about developing resources for basic education. So Sati, can you hear me? You're muted. I don't know if you're there or not. Sati? Ah. Can you hear me, Sati? We are not hearing you, I'm afraid. No. I'm afraid we don't have a connection that we can hear, Sati. So I think we're good. It looks to me as if we're probably going to have to leave Sati's presentation to a future meeting, which is a pity, because it would have followed on very well from the issues that have been raised. I'll perhaps try again a little bit later. No, sorry, there's
the network can be horrible, you know.
Yeah, we're just not getting a connection. We can try and come back to that if Sati's connection improves. I think what I should do now, Christina, just move on to one of our other topics. Christina, you were going to talk to us about some of the investigation and the reparation commitments that have been made from Glasgow University. And I think we're planning to follow that with some other discussions of reparations in future conversations. But Christina, over to you just now.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm a lecturer in global history at the University of Glasgow, and I started there at the beginning of 2018, when the university was already kind of halfway through a research project looking at specifically how the university had profited from Caribbean plantation slavery. And so it was quite a focused study on the sort of finances of that. And then the results of that were announced in September 2018. And then just sort of about a year later, on the 23rd of August 2019, the 23rd of August being the United Nations International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolition. I don't know if I can share my... So this was the 23rd of August 2019. A delegation from the University of the West Indies came to Glasgow to sign a memorandum of understanding between the two institutions that was aimed at developing a 10-year programme of reparative justice. And so this followed this year of intensive archival research by Dr. Stephen Mullen into the financial benefits that accrued to the University of Glasgow from both enslavers and from the trade in goods produced by enslaved workers. And the report is available online on our Slavery Studies Centre website. It's called Slavery, Abolition in the University of Glasgow. And in that, you can get the kind of detailed and sort of referenced information that they were looking at, but it very much focused on the financial sort of beneficiaries. But it does make this kind of, almost as an aside, it raises the issue of material donations as well. And kind of leading on a little bit from what we were just talking about, it talks about how books and scientific and medical equipment were donated by people who had profited from slavery in the Caribbean. And that's really where my kind of role came into this, which was to kind of look a little bit, or to start to open up these questions around cultural heritage and slavery and the University of Glasgow. So going beyond the question of cash and into the questions of intellectual contributions, of material objects, and of archival material as well, and sort of holding of different kinds of histories. And so for that Memorandum of Understanding signing, which happened in the University Chapel, we organized a little exhibition to try and like sort of bring out some of these questions and to kind of give you an idea of the complexity of this. So one of the objects mentioned in this report was some astronomical instruments that were left by a man named McFarlane to the university. And they were shipped from his plantation in Jamaica in June 1756. And on that shipment from Jamaica, so these are, and McFarlane was a sort of famous mathematician and astronomer, and so these were the very advanced, very valuable instruments. On the shipment from Jamaica to Glasgow, they were damaged by salt water, and when they arrived in Glasgow, they were cleaned and fixed by James Watt. So James Watt of the steam engine fame, who was also himself the son of a merchant in slave-produced goods. And so Watt's studies at Glasgow had been funded by the slave trade and slavery in the Caribbean. And Watt's work and legacy as an engineer is widely recognised and celebrated up to the present day, including at the University of Glasgow, where our School of Engineering is the James Watt School of Engineering. And yeah, I mean, he features pretty prominently in the university marketing materials. Less well known about James Watt Jr. is that he was directly involved in trafficking an enslaved child. And so just these astronomical instruments sort of bought and used by someone who owned a slave plantation in Jamaica, then left to Glasgow, were then worked on by an apprentice and a student of the university who was himself like being funded by profits from trade and slave-produced goods, who himself then trafficked an enslaved child, sort of show you this kind of web of individuals and the institution that are profiting, not just financially, but intellectually from all these connections. And the McFarlane instruments also bring up this question around memorialization and the naming of buildings. There's a building named after McFarlane, there's an engineering school named after Watt, there's a very nice statue of Watt in the Hunterian Museum, and all these things around the university that seek to kind of valorize individual intellectual achievement, but they don't really address the undergirding exploitation that made all of that possible. So that was one thing that we wanted to, coming out of the report, that we wanted to explore more fully, kind of building on this this kind of aside about the astronomical instruments. We wanted to work with community stakeholders to try and open up these questions, sort of driven by this question of what was the role of transatlantic slavery in the cultural heritage of the university, and what should we do with these objects and papers and publications and books? How should we sort of comprehend that? And so we put together an exhibition of some selected objects. that would be then put on public display with the aim kind of generating questions and responses. And we tried to select things from not only kind of across the range of the disciplines of the university, but also objects that moved beyond the period of slavery and addressed somewhat the legacies of slavery. And so if we go in here, 3 of the items were actually in the original collection that formed the University Museum, the Hunterian Museum as it's known. And so they were collected by William Hunter, who was an 18th century doctor, and also a sort of self-aware Enlightenment man interested in cultures and histories across the British Empire. And so the objects from Hunter's collection were things like this, which is a map of Barbados, published in 1657, that actually shows enslaved people running away, being chased by an armed man on horseback. And so it's a kind of reminder that there was this kind of near constant resistance to slavery and its violent suppression that features even in this kind of, so this is from Richard Liggon's A True and Exact History of the Island of Barbados. So it's a sort of educational academic tome really about Barbados, but with this reminder of resistance to slavery in it. Another object that came sort of from this original 18th century collection is this painting of the interior of the Fully Academy of Fine Arts. The Academy was originally funded by merchants who traded in human beings and in slave-produced goods. John Glassford of Duggleston, Archibald Ingram, and John Coates Campbell all contributed the funds to establish this very beautiful, bright, grand studio in Glasgow, which was the forebear of the Glasgow School of Art. And then just to pull out, and this is another, to give you an idea of the range, and the kind of other side of things, this is another of William Hunter's acquisitions, a citron bug collected in Sierra Leone in the 1770s. And so this little creature was trapped and killed in what is now southern Sierra Leone, very close to an active Scottish-run slave trading fort at the time. And the entomologist, who's Henry Smoothman, who's credited with identifying and collecting the bug, he was hosted at the fort by these Scottish slave traders. And he also married into a local African elite family. And he very likely relied on local African experts who knew about the terrain, who knew about insect life, to locate and catch his specimens. And Smoothman and the insects most likely would have returned to Europe on board a slave ship or on board a ship that was provisioning the slave trade. And so kind of across the different disciplines then, you can see that there's all these links and these kinds of connections and ways in which the students and staff in the city of Glasgow have benefited from British involvement in slave trading and slavery. And so this exhibition invited responses from the visitors to the University Chapel. And I mean, I suppose it's important to remember that visitors to Glasgow University Chapel probably didn't come specifically to see an exhibition about the university's links to slavery. And many of them will have come with a really specifically positive perspective on the university and its history. Lots of people come to kind of see these grand old buildings that look a bit like something from Harry Potter. And so then they're kind of confronted with this quite different picture of the university. And so from the kind of comments board that we put up in the exhibition, one visitor commented, "Nobody's perfect." Another said, "Slavery is an atrocity which has been practiced by almost every civilization in history. We should not ascribe blame or feel guilt for the actions of those long dead." And this kind of idea of like an ascription of guilt, which is not mentioned in the exhibition at all, which only sort of looks at these objects and their kind of connections is kind of mentioned throughout the responses to it. So another one is, why apologize for something that happened 150 years ago? It's not your fault, move on. And again, there's no apology in the text of the exhibition. There's just simply a sort of stating of what happened. So the ubiquity of these responses denying guilt, of course, are not unique to Glasgow University. They can be seen across the British public sphere, particularly when these discussions are perceived to be somehow out of place. So in rural areas, country houses, beloved old universities. And a particular facet of this in Scotland is the kind of distancing of Scotland and Scottish national identity through the deployment of a kind of universalist working class identity. So one of the comments in the exhibition said, the exhibition talks about our history, that we in Scotland share responsibility for this appalling abuse. The vast majority of working class men, women and children had no political, economic or social power at that time. It is not our history. We are not responsible. And so there's this idea that Scottishness is completely congruent with being working class, and being working class then is like completely congruent with having absolutely no power in society whatsoever. In other places, this kind of is reinforced by this kind of widespread misapprehension that Scottish people were sort of widely enslaved in the Americas and Caribbean in the early colonial period, so-called white slaves. And so we got a lot of commentary and responses about, what about Scottish slaves? What about the Irish enslaved? So the kind of challenges then that are facing institutions, I think particularly institutions in Scotland, are quite, they're structural and they're very deep rooted. So the British University has historically been a site for the reproduction and the expansion of colonial dominance. As the European empires expanded, so too did the British university system. So the universities in Britain were funded and powered by the profits of slavery, indigenous dispossession and imperialism, but also the Western university system was sort of exported and imposed throughout the British Empire. But at all times also the university offers this kind of site for colonized, racialized people and their allies to disrupt this process. And so the university has also always been the site for kind of anti-colonial study, for anti-imperial protest, for international solidarity and refuge. And so trying to interrogate the archives of the university itself and its sort of material makeup involves a careful assessment of both the internal power structures and then how these relate to the broader social forces. The next steps in the programme for University of Glasgow involve partnership working with the University of the West Indies and continued development of engagement and support for local community activists and organisations. But as well as these kind of external activities, there's also an ongoing internal reflection. And so this year, the university published a report detailing widespread racism on campus. And so really trying to sort of confront the facts or the extent to which students and staff are still living through legacies of slavery and empire, and sort of trying to face up to how imperial conquest, dispossession, enslavement sort of shaped not only the trajectory of our kind of shared histories, but it's also shaped how these histories were recorded, how they're taught and displayed and consumed. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Christine. Have you any plans to publish yourself on this research?
You know, I haven't really. No, because it's not my area of research. I have been putting together something on the exhibitions, on this kind of idea of cultural heritage within a university. but I think for the kind of broader University of Glasgow program, I think Stephen Mullen is like putting something together, and he's written, I think, a book chapter about the university and slavery, which draws from his research, his really deep research into the finances and how, and his kind of methodology for doing that, which is much more complex than anyone might imagine, I suppose. But it's a difficult area to publish in, because I don't know where it would sit really as well.
Yes, I think that's what and yet I think the experience, what you're uncovering and what you've been saying, I suspect can be repeated, across Britain and everywhere that's got a university, and that's every major town and city. I mean, I've been looking a little bit myself about the role of some particular Scots in Liverpool in the beginning, the middle of the 19th century, whose money is made in slavery, and they're so much involved in the development of cultural institutions in Liverpool, which I think eventually leads to universities. But also in the, I was struck with what you were saying about this distancing by claiming Scotland's working class, and so wasn't involved. But I mean, the people I'm aware of in Liverpool were also involved in the development of working class education, the whole history of the Mechanics Institutes, which were one of a big movement which provided working class education. So I'm sure there'll be benefits in a lot of this being shared across the UK. Would anybody else like to ask Christine any questions on this? Just while I'm waiting to see if anybody wants to come in. I mean, there was a conversation we were having quite some time ago that we never picked up, which was about the records of the production of machinery in Glasgow, and the way in which that machinery was used on sugar plantations, and I'm sure and the same would be true of the steam locomotives, and I mean that will be across all of the British colonies, the benefit which came from that to the industrial cities.
Yes, well, I mean, that's where the Watt story is so interesting, because I mean, he plays this large role in the development of the steam engine, and then one of these steam sugar machinery companies is run by his sons, and at one point Watt writes a letter saying that he doesn't think the company should be selling machinery to enslavers, and so he sort of, this kind of what seems like a kind of anti-slavery position sort of later in his life, that the machinery should not be sold to slave plantations in the Caribbean, even though this was how his father made his profit, and he was involved in it himself when he was younger, which shows how, I mean, none of these figures are particularly easy to define as pro-slavery or anti-slavery, because of course everyone's opinions about everything changes through time, and through Watt's lifetime, general social opinions about slavery changed hugely, and that's why it's kind of more interesting, I think, to think about the sort of structures around it, rather than focusing in on it. Is Watt a bad man or a good man? Like, it's not a very interesting question. But and also unanswerable, but rather like how was his position kind of buttressed? Like, how did he fit into this like broader benefits that the city had from slavery? And so the sugar machines are really interesting, because I mean, one of the companies that we have the records for at Glasgow University starts in 1840, so I mean it's absolutely in response to the end of slavery in the British Empire. They're going to replace people with machines, I think is the idea. But in the end, they're exporting to Puerto Rico and Cuba and places where slavery is still legal as well.
Thanks, Christine. Would anybody else like to comment or ask questions? No. And sorry, And the relationship that's developing with the University of the West Indies, I mean, that seems particularly important, and something I think that's been lacking. I'm sorry. Could I also, just before you answer, could I say one of the things that's come out of our lunchtime conversations in Scotland, there now is an investigation of the way in which museums are presenting this history, which is being led by Sir Jeff Palmer. And there's various groups within it, and there's a research subgroup looking at, I suppose, what needs to be researched is research the way in which museums can research this material. And Professor Sati Whyte has now joined one of these groups, and that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been having these conversations. So, I think it's and today's been another really good example of the potential spin-offs from simply having this diverse group that is voices from across continents, and it's certainly for me it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm sure that I think is just one example of the way in which forming these productive relationships for the future, and I think the relationship with the University of West Indies must have enormous potential to change both universities.
No, I think absolutely it does, and it prompts lots of conversations as well about rethinking our teaching at Glasgow, and rethinking the curriculum and how research is funded, and where we distribute those funds. And I think also because Professor Hilary Beckles has been such a leader in sort of globally in this conversation about reparations. It's experimenting with different models of what the reparations are going to look like, and I think there was an awareness that states are more difficult thing to tackle, or bodies to tackle, and sort of looking at instead these kind of institutions that can lend a sort of a kind of gravitas or seriousness, and are also more open to the idea, because there's lots of so many benefits to the University of Glasgow from the partnership with the University of West Indies, and so they're a lot more open to let's explore this, but then it lends this kind of reality, and also a kind of endorsement to the process. So I think it's a really good also for sort of encouraging a kind of broader based movement. In that sense, it's symbolically important.
Thank you, Christine. Nobody else has indicated that they want to come in, so can I say thank you to Christine, and thanks again to Dr. Sango for his earlier presentation. I think it's given us some really interesting material, but also I've got about 10 boxes of books that I want to ship somewhere, and now I know where. So I'm sure there's so much can be done. So thank you to everyone. I'm going to suggest we end a bit earlier today because we've lost two presenters as it happened, Sati through connection problems, and I'm not sure what happened to Gloria Davies, but I'm sure we can pick up on these discussions later on. Just a final, I don't know if there's anything anybody here would like to update others on before we end. I'm not seeing any indications. So anyway, can I say thank you to everybody. Richard, your video has just come on. Did that mean you wanted to?
No, I just wanted to say thanks, and perhaps it's not too gratuitous self-promotion to say that we'll be on a panel together next week and considering some of these discussions, because one thing that's come out of the Glasgow study is that it, alongside with Black activism over the last year, has prompted a lot more work from many other universities undertaking similar work of a financial study, and then more importantly, the more difficult task of what you do with that information. And what does reparative justice actually mean? And so I think Liz might have that, but that's a discussion that we'll be having next week. So
Do you have the link to that handy, Richard, that could go into the chat for anybody who's
Yeah,
interested
absolutely.
in? And that's Thursday. Is Thursday and Friday of next week? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And focused on the colonial collections of the northeast of Scotland. So yeah, it'd be nice if people could join that. Bunmi, you have your hand up. We haven't spoken yet.
Yeah. Hi, Richard, what time is your thing next week?
It's a full day UK time next on the 17th and 18th. So let me see if I can look at the program in terms of so it begins 1 p.m.
Oh, okay.
So that's early, but not too early in Toronto time. So
Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Bumi. Right. Well, thank you to everybody, and thank you for your patience. I'll be glad. I hope we see Liz back next week. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Thank you, David. Yeah,
Bye-bye.
and yeah.
David.
Right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.